Good morning, everybody. I'm Mary, and I'm welcoming you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown Sunday virtual service from my living room, as is everybody else from their assorted living rooms, dining rooms, studies, cabins. So, as you know, we are a liberal religious community where our tradition draws from the wisdom of the world's religions, the guidance of reason, and direct experiences of mystery and wonder. We believe every person matters, and each person has the right and the responsibility to follow their own conscience. We hope to touch your spirit, your heart, and your mind as we have all zoomed in here from our socially distanced pews, but we will be together in a few weeks as we continue our varied spiritual paths in person. So whoever you are, wherever you are, and whomever you love, I'm so glad you are here with us today. Okay, I'll start announcements by saying, as we just said, our first in-person service will be June 27th. We'll be in the back parking lot, and Rick and hopefully a few helpers and John and I will help set up some tents and get the sound system going. And we will be coming up later and letting you know announcements in the next few weeks exactly how, we're going to do masks or not to masks, social distancing and all that good stuff during that service and during the rest of the summer. So if anyone else has any announcements, please unmute yourself and let us know. Miranda?
Good morning. Probably lots of you already know this. If you got the beautiful newsletter this morning and looked it over, you know this. But on Friday, June 4th, Erica Dusky is going to take a trip to Weaver's Farm in, I think it's Morgantown, she says. And you can contact her to sign up to go with her to pick strawberries. And then coincidentally, on the 6th of June, which is a Sunday, we'll have an in-person coffee hour starting at 12:30, am I right? I think so, around 12:30.
Yes.
12:30.
Yes. So coffee hour, so grab your lunch after the service and then come on over to a coffee hour at 12:30 in person at the fellowship outside. And bring, if you will, if you like, bring something made out of strawberries. And that'll be our strawberry festival, our strawberry day. That'll be fun. Join us.
I have an announcement. This week, contractor will be doing the closet as you walk in the foyer in the back. He found rotted sheathing and rotted 2x, so he's going to replace those and redo the drywall. So that's this week.
Anybody else? Going once, twice. Okay. So now, even though we are in our various separate abodes, it's time to put our phones on in worship mode and back on mute and sit back, get comfortable as the chimes call us together. Opening words. This is Memorial Day weekend, where we honor those who died in our country's wars, whose sacrifices helped to give us the lives we lead today. And I forgot it's upstairs, but as my dad's World War II Victory Medal says on the back, they fought for freedom from fear and want and freedom of speech and religion. Nearly 246 years after the Declaration of Independence, we are still striving to reach those goals and set out for us. Sometimes it seems we go the wrong way, but we must keep our faith that the arc of history always moves toward justice. Okay. This is our chalice lighting, and the words come from Christine Robinson. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows and gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. Now, Carly, will you please play Spirit of Life? Thank you, Carly. And I'll do a little aside here, but I don't know if anybody's noticed, but see this little thing right here? That's the baby on the mother's chest. So little part of our natural life. Linda, would you like to say anything about the offering this morning?
Sure. The link is in the chat box, and I also have the address in there for anyone who wants to send a check. And we accept it in any form, online or via the mail. And I wanted to thank everyone for participating in our pledge. We did really well, and that's going to be in the upcoming newsletter. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. One of the traditions of Unitarian Universalism is Joys and Sorrows, where we share what's going on in our lives. Sometimes it's very important, sometimes not so much, but it means something to us. So if you have anything that you feel needs to be shared, please unmute and share. Anybody?
I have a joy.
Okay.
After 2 years of being out of service, the recycling services near the river is going to open on June 12th, I believe it is. It's a Saturday. It'll be open every month on the second Saturday.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great news. Anybody else? Okay. Carly, will you treat us to another musical selection and tell us what you're going to be playing?
I'm going to play The Swan from Carnival of the Animals.
Excuse me. Thank you, Carly. That was lovely. The topic this morning is empathy. It's a word that has been in the news for most of the last year with the pandemic and the protests and the differing reactions to both. My impetus for this was Derek Chauvin's trial for the murder of George Floyd, for this talk. I watched almost all of it, and it was heart-wrenching. And even though I'd seen some of the video of his death, I'd never seen it in its entirety before. Seeing the entirety of the video brought into focus the brutality of the event. I remember watching his funeral and the eulogy by Reverend Al Sharpton, where he had to stand for the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that Chauvin was shown kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck. What we learned during the trial was that the original video was not the whole thing, that it was actually 9 minutes and 29 seconds. It was an evil act that took someone else's life. And it was even worse than we thought. The lack of caring that was so clear in the one still where Chauvin was staring straight at the camera was seen over and over and became more powerful with each showing. We heard the testimony of the witnesses and what they had to go through, watching helplessly, knowing what they were seeing was wrong, yet feeling powerless to do anything about it. And the youngest witness was only 9. They begged and pleaded and did everything they could to stop it. One brave young woman, 17 at the time, took the video that sparked a summer of protest. That young woman deserves immense credit, because does anyone believe that without the video, a murder charge or a conviction would have even happened? All of those witnesses, I think there were 10 there, felt some sort of guilt for not doing more. But what more could they have done? Seeing that video made me place myself in the bystander's place. What would I have done? Could I have done anything more than they did? Of course not. If they had charged Chauvin, maybe to knock him off of Mr. Floyd, they very well could have been shot themselves or faced a charge of interfering with a police officer. After all, we wouldn't know what they had prevented. One person even called the police on the police. Think about that. They respected law enforcement to do something about this situation, as did the woman monitoring the scene via the security camera across the street, who started calling superiors. Everyone there knew something was wrong, except for the 4 officers involved. And even one of them did question what they were doing when he asked Chauvin if they should let up on Mr. Floyd's when Mr. Floyd's pulse slowed. He was overruled. It was his first week on the force, and Chauvin was his training officer. This is rock and hard place. And we have all seen the cop shows on TV where the bad cops lean on the good ones to look the other way. The idea that you don't talk to the rat squad, otherwise known as internal affairs. My question is, what was someone like Chauvin, with 18 previous complaints against him, doing as a training officer? How many other officers has he trained in his style of policing? And where did he learn it? When I said that I watched most of the trial, I mean the prosecution. I finally gave up paying any attention to the defense because it was a constant refrain of that basically said any reasonable policeman, and those were the 2 words, would be afraid of the big black man passed out face down on the street in handcuffs. There was no empathy, sympathy, or compassion, as though all 3 words are linked, that were shown to Mr. Floyd. Yet we were supposed to, and the jury was supposed to, have empathy for someone who had shown none to a fellow human being. When the lawyer kept talking about a reasonable policeman, I literally yelled at the TV about the police chief and all the other police who had testified that no, this was not proper procedure and it was not part of their academy training. However, it does seem to be part of some people's street training. Now, this could sound like an attack on police. It's not. The vast majority are good men and women wanting to do the right thing. Well, and everybody says, but there are just a few bad apples. And that's true. But the whole saying goes, a few bad apples spoil the barrel. My interactions with the Chicago Police Department have always been fine, and include asking where the best place was to catch a meal before going to a play. Then there was the time my mom forgot how wide the sidewalks are on Michigan Avenue and took out the rear passenger tire on her Celica by cutting it too close one night after a concert in Grant Park. I got out, opened the hatch, and started to get the spare, knowing that some kind stranger would stop and help. She went off to find a payphone and encountered a policeman. And when she asked him where she could find a phone to call someone to help, his answer was, "I'll change it for you." And by the time they got by, the kind stranger had stopped, discovered the spare was flat, and had taken it to a service station to put in air. He did come back with the spare, which actually had a hole and he'd had to patch. But the policeman stayed the whole time with us to make sure everything went fine. And then we were safely on our way after the tire was changed. Another time, a Black friend was walking across the street. The cop decided he was going too slowly and whacked him in the stomach with a billy club. He was 11, and it was just after the convention riots in 1968. Then there was Jim Bond, a friend who was studying for his PhD in biology at the University of Chicago at the same time my dad was studying for his in history in the early 1950s. Jim got to know every patrolman in the district in Hyde Park around the university because invariably they would stop him as he was walking home from the lab at night, wondering what he was doing out on the street. I bring these stories up because it makes me wonder if Mom and I would have had the same reactions from the stranger and or the cop if we'd been Black. I'd like to think so, but I'm not betting on it. The Black Lives Matter protests, nearly 99% of which were peaceful, were about this, getting the rest of America to wake up and realize that racism exists in this country, as it has since the Europeans first stepped foot in the New World. The people who refuse to see or acknowledge this reply that all lives matter or blue lives matter. What they seem to be saying to me is they matter more than the Black lives. Of course, all Black lives and blue lives matter. The Black Lives Matter movement is not about putting Black lives above others. It's about saying we matter too. We're just as valuable as anyone else, and we're getting tired of being killed for driving or walking or falling asleep at a Wendy's. The pandemic also caused an empathetic divide as well, one that makes absolutely no sense in my opinion, as our polarized politics caused us to have different reactions depending on where we fell on the political spectrum. COVID-19 is a virus. It doesn't care if you are a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Socialist, Communist, totally atheist as far as politics is concerned. It just doesn't care. It doesn't discriminate. Yet somehow people thought it was only something that others got, such as those in cities and not in the small towns, as it hit New York and California hard early. The doctors and scientists knew what would happen, and they told us what would happen if we didn't mitigate and quickly. And we did lock down for what, 2 weeks maybe? But after that, people were like, we have to get back to work. We have to get going. This is over. Let's go back to normal. And then we'd all know what happened, because everybody's thinking this can only happen to someone else and not to me. And as long as it was happening elsewhere to someone else, why should they change anything they do? There was such a lack of empathy for what was happening to the people that were landing in the hospital and their families and those who were caring for them, and for the hospital workers who had to deal with this day in and day out. Some people appreciated, such as those in New York, who I think it was 5 o'clock at night, all went out to their balconies and clapped, letting them know, the hospital workers know, that they appreciated what they were doing. The way to keep from getting sick was medicine and science. And since the disease was new, the advice and things to do changed over time. Yet some of those would say, well, they don't know what they're talking about. They keep changing. Well, that's what learning is all about. You change what you're learning or what you're doing. And then, let's see. So all those reactions seem to me, and this is personal, so selfish and callous. The selfishness and the lack of empathy and caring for others really manifested in mask wearing and all the arguments people got into, which none of us like masks, not a one. They were annoying and uncomfortable, steamed up our glasses, but they were necessary to stop the spread of the virus. They helped the wearer a little bit, but yet we're primarily wearing them to protect others from what we were breathing out. And people would say, well, masks don't work. And my response to that would be, okay, then why does the surgical team wear them when they're in the operating room? Is it just a fashion choice? And I really wish someone would explain to me what freedom is being interfered with by wearing one. It wasn't that long ago that such a public health emergency could pull us all together instead of pulling us further apart. One for all and all for one, and as we don't hear enough, doing something for the common good, not just for ourselves. where we empathize with our fellow man, woman, and child. When I was a child, and I think it was second or third grade, they came to school on 2 different days. And one day gave us the smallpox vaccine and the other the one for polio. No permission slips. The county nurse just showed up, and we stood up in line at the teacher's desk waiting to get the shot or the sugar cube. As far as I know, none of the parents complained. They all were old enough to remember the horrors of smallpox and polio. And as an aside, one of my cousins was actually part of the polio vaccine trials in the 1950s. And I have tried to empathize with the anti-vaccine and anti-mask people, and I just can't, because maybe I'm just too logical. I had my argument with the anti-vaxxer out by the mailbox and had to agree to disagree, because arguing facts to conspiracy theories got me absolutely nowhere. But facts versus conspiracies is a whole other topic. And the other thing that we saw was the rise in Asian hate, blaming our fellow citizens who just happened to be of Asian descent of causing this pandemic to happen. We'll get to the bottom of the origins one day, but to fault any one group is wrong. It's no different than blaming all the crimes on the scary big black guy. Our first 2 principles as Unitarians are the inherent worth and dignity of every person and justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. There's a direct line from empathy to compassion. Empathy is where you put yourself in the position of another and feel what they feel, or at least what you think they feel. Compassion is being sympathetic to another's suffering and wanting to do something about it. The witnesses to George Floyd's death had compassion for what he was going through and wanted to help and were powerless. They will have to live with those thoughts and memories for the rest of their lives. The online trolls who berated them for not doing more had no empathy or understanding for what position they were in. A jury heard all of the facts and made a decision, a right one in my book, but only a tiny step in what we hope is a more equitable and compassionate and empathetic future. Thank you and blessed be. Carly, will you now treat us to another musical selection and let us know what it is? Oh, wait a minute. I know what it is. This is Lean on Me. Never mind. Thank you, Carly. Now, please join me in our closing closing words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth or the warmth of commitment. These we hold in our hearts until we are together again. Okay. And this has been a bit of a heavy topic this morning. So I'm going to leave you with a message that is apropos of absolutely nothing that we've been talking about, but it is something that keeps me up at night. Is chocolate a vegetable or is it a fruit? On my last trip, I told someone that I considered chocolate a vegetable since it was a bean. He said I was wrong and that it was a fruit because it had seeds. On the other hand, whether it is a fruit or a vegetable, it still counts as part of the daily consumption of fruits and veggies. And that is my final word. So please continue now with the coffee hour.